one of the other guys can go on Twitch and see if it's actually working or not.
I've got Twitch open.
As do I.
Mute it if you have it open, otherwise you'll get a weird echo effect.
Yeah.
I've got headphones on, so should be fine.
It is loading video. Yeah, we good.
Yep. Okay, I won't touch my computer anymore then.
Paused, it's muted.
Right, let's start with the artwork on the screen.
So the delay set to? It's like 10 seconds.
Yeah.
I've completely forgotten what I was doing. That's what I was doing.
Are you Facebooking, Jeff?
I am indeed Facebooking.
I'm closing my Facebook window and I'm closing my email so that I don't get weird pings going off in my ears.
Okay, we are now streaming.
Won't be any viewers yet. I thought. Well, you should be able to see that, Stu.
Yeah, I'll just get it open. We have 9 viewers.
Aha. Welcome, everyone.
So long not current view. Yeah, we'll do. Cool, just stuck a shout on Facebook, so hopefully we'll get a few people. So,
I think we can make a start.
yeah, I reckon so.
Welcome, guys, to the Paranoid Miniature stream. We've got Ross Charles here, who is our sculptor.
Hello.
Hello, all. It's going to be doing a bit of work on Maharal, which is our sand golem from the Priory faction this evening. So to all you that are watching, thank you for joining us. And hopefully anyone watching this later, you'll be able to see a bit of what goes on behind the scenes. So without further ado, here we are.
Right, hi guys. Thanks for joining us. I'm started this sculpt today, so it's quite early in the process, and we're going to be just sort of picking out some parts to work on. So the artwork that you should be able to see on your screen is the concept art for the sand golem. This is the front view, and we have a unposed back view as well, so that I've got all of this rather funky detail. So the background for the character is it's a golem built by the Egyptians, so it's made out of sand rather than clay. Big bulky creature, 50mm base, going to be about 45mm tall. And so far what we've done is build a rough model and do a very basic pose test, which is here. And we're going to be developing this into a full miniature. Before though, I'm just going to run through a time-lapse video of the work that's been done today, which will give you an idea of where we started. So I'll just pop this up on the screen, and this is about 8 times actual speed. I wish I worked as quickly as this, but here we go. So I started... Oh, it's just loading itself. Started with a ball and worked from there. And because it's a golem, I'm not too worried about my anatomy because it's going to be fairly crude. I just wanted to get my rough shapes done. Now, there's been some discussion about heads. We've had a couple of different head concepts. So the head that I sculpt here as a rough is not actually the head that we're going to end up using. And the head that's on the model in the pose that I had on the screen just now is also not the head that we're going to be using.
Awkward customers.
I know, it's shocking. So you can see here that I'm building the head, the arms, the torso and the legs as separate pieces. They will all be tied together eventually and sculpted into each other, but I'm setting up the rough sculpt in this way so that it's kind of like an action figure, and we can mess around with the posing and get things the way we like it without having to worry too much about deforming the wrong piece or pieces interacting badly with each other. So this is his lovely tree trunk legs going on now. As you can see, this is all really rough work. It doesn't need to be super detailed at this stage. It's just massing out a form. I didn't choose to start with a standard sort of pre-built human for this model because I knew that proportionally it was going to be quite extreme, and also that like I say, the crudeness of the model, it doesn't even have real feet, it just sort of, its legs kind of terminating columns of sand. So it would actually probably have been just as much work, and I wouldn't have had as much control as I have building it from scratch like this. So you can see I'm just sort of tweaking and getting it to a neutral pose that I'm more or less happy with. And sorting out some glutes. Got to have good glutes. Look at him go. Those pelvic floor exercises.
Extra charge distance.
That's it. So this was kind of the starting point for the work that we were going to do this evening, and from there, where we've got to is this pose, which is again a rough pose, and this core model. You'll see it's got a slightly different head, and it's proportionally been slightly altered, and it's got this weird faceting because these are all fairly low resolution pieces. I've retopologized, which means that I've taken the sort of digital clay and run a process to get a lower a lower detail mesh, which is better for bending and stretching and shaping. So the current plan is I'm probably going to focus on the head and the headdress to start with, and see where that gets us to, and we may or may not have time for more work. So you can see a headdress here, and I've got some additional artwork off to the side. So we're going to do a little bit of work on the face and developing the head, and then once we've done that, we're going to go in and build a headdress in a different piece of software, I suspect. So let's start off zooming on the head and isolate it. So this is the head that we've got. We started the original artwork as an almost sort of zombie-like head, and then we had a secondary piece of art which has a very sophisticated, almost regal-looking head. We all agreed it looked a little like Thanos from Guardians of the Galaxy. So currently what we're going to do is develop a head that's somewhere between the two. So it's got the more human features, but it's going to be quite brutish and crude because it's been built out of sand, as we said. And we're going to put some sand effects onto the model. So I'm just going to start sculpting into this, guys. If I do, or if you see anything that happens, or you've got any thoughts on what you want, just pipe up and we'll add that to the model and try and work it in. So we're just going to start to rough in some of the underlying muscle mass that will create a sense of power in the head. And we're going to have some fairly hefty neck muscles. Most of these neck muscles will actually be created at the point where we're posing the figure out, but I just want to make sure we've laid out the basics so that when we go in a minute and add and start to create our headdress, we know that it's resting against the model as it will probably be mass-wise. So we nice thick roll of skin at the back there. Now, because he's a golem, he's not going to have. Oops. Let's just turn off being able to paint in colour, because we're not going to turn the model black. Because he's a golem, he's not going to have much in the way of ears or any difficult concepts like that. I'm going to take a little bit of the thickness out of there. Alright, so I want to create this sort of plane running down the face. Again, he's a sculpted figure, so he doesn't have to be anatomically perfect. So we can have a bit of interest, just bit of fun, developing some interesting visual landmarks. That's quite nice. And then we've got this ocular cutout here, which we're going to want to keep. I'm not going to worry about an upper eyelid, because I can't believe that whoever sculpted him was too concerned. I'm in two minds as to whether or not he even needs nostrils, to be honest. We're going to cut into here and just create a more crude.
Yeah, I think he needs more of a shape of a nose than an actual nose as such.
Yeah.
It's not something that's going to be a functioning part of his body.
No, he doesn't respire. So I think it's going to be something like that. And then we're going to use the there's going to be lots of use of the slash tool to get this idea of it being a sculpted surface. So I mean, I'm working at quite a low density right now. We might have to subdivide to start to sharpen it up, but I'm going to be cutting and shaping and then just smoothing to get this sense of it's been carved or sculpted out of wet sand that's been left dry in the sun. So these sharper angles will give that sense of it being an artificial creation rather than an organic life form. And of course the Egyptian, you look at Egyptian art and it has a lot of sharply angled planar surfaces in, so it's sort of thematically appropriate to be thinking in those terms. I mean, if we were thinking truly Egyptian, we'd give it a really larger hawkish nose because that was part of their art, but I'm not sure it would really feel right for the character.
Yeah, if you've got any questions, guys, just put them up in the chat. And
Yeah, remember I can't see
Yeah.
the Twitch stream, so if
neither
you've
can
got
I.
anything you want to know, anything you want to know, stick it in the stream, and the guys will pick it up and shoot the questions across to me. So we can start to see we've got something kind of brutish, but not. Let's kind of. It's got something about it. Cut that plane in there like that, and then we're going to fade this back in a moment. I mean, a lot of this work, because we're working at such a low density, a lot of this work will fade, but what it'll do is it'll create angles and planes which will stay, and they'll feed through. So when eventually, a little bit further down the line, this is a production model, you know, ink will pick up on this, and we'll get those elements. Right, that's quite nice. Let's just knock that back a little bit there. Yeah. Let's just tighten up this jaw and undercut it slightly. Right, let's do a little bit up here. I'm just gonna think about when you frown. Everyone thinks when you frown that your eyebrows go up and down. If you actually, and I know as soon as I say this, I know that lots of people then immediately do it.
I'm
If you
frowning.
actually frown and feel, what actually happens is your eyebrows move together and create this knot of compressed flesh here. So if you want to create a frown, I'll show you this. I don't know if it will work or not, but if you actually move them further together, closer together, he looks more angry. Up and down doesn't really do as much, but closer together adds a lot more tension to the model. So little
Nice.
trick that we use on models there.
Yeah. I guess move them up, he'll look surprised as well.
Yes. I mean, obviously, you know, he's a sculpted form, and miniature sculpting generally is the art of exaggeration. So we can actually, you know, we have put them on tilt already. But right, that's getting a nice lab-like feel. I mean, what I might do is experiment with just how deep we can afford to make some of these planar cuts. So we'll do some now, and then we'll zoom out and see what it looks like. That's quite nice. That's
Yeah, it's starting to look more artificial and less like a living, breathing body.
yeah. It's just getting that sculptural form, and then I'm just gonna subdivide it again, and I'm gonna duplicate it because I want to just do a bit of an experimentation. So you can see this is the underlying structure of the model. I'm going to run a thing called a Dynamesh. Dynamesh is a tool that we use a lot when we're sculpting. And what it does is it reprojects the model in a very, very high density surface. So effectively what this lets you do is capture much more detail into the model. So we just need to wait a second while that projection in progress bar at the top of my screen moves slowly across the screen. I wonder if I set the I might have set the detail level a little high. Oh no, we're all right. We're back. So it looks basically the same, but if I turn on the grid mode again, you can see that it's now very, very dense. And what this will let us do is be able to go in. I'm going to turn off X, and I just want to talk a little bit. I was looking at some pictures of sand and the surfaces of sand, and I'm sure you've all seen this. Sand will sometimes, you'll get patches where the surface of the sand has sort of baked in the sun and created like a crust, a thin crust, and then it kind of breaks up, and you've got the more liquid's not really the right word, but the much more flexible sand underneath. So I've been looking at ways that we can recreate patches of this on the model, and I'm just gonna do this roughly to give an idea of the sort of thing that we can look at doing. And all I'm doing really is masking. This shadowed area is a mask, and I'm just taking some bits out of it, and then I'm going to sharpen it up. And if I get the clay brush now, oops, and remember to set it to subtract, otherwise this doesn't work at all. And just feather that there like that. Invert. Get the inflate brush. I'm just going to pop these edges slightly. Because one of the things that we do need to be doing with the model, again, to enhance that sense of it being a construct, is find ways of creating surface detail that gives some indication of its material structure. So you can see now we get that sense of a crusted surface that's breaking open.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of thing that will pick up nicely for painting. So that's going to be one of the elements that I want to use on the model. Right, I think what we're going to do at this point is we'll take this. This is just a proxy, so we don't need to worry too much. And we'll pre-process it. And I think we've got the basic form there. We want to do some more work on it, but I want to put the headdress on so that we're developing the rest of the detail and developing the rest of the character of the model with the headdress in place, because that's going to be a really important part of the head. So to do that, this model is currently 1.5 million polygons, which is way more than my modelling software can cope with. So I'm using a decimator, which has now reduced it to 32,000, which is a bit more bearable. So I'm going to export this head 03, and we're going to pop into a different program. Anyone who's seen me do anything for Guild Ball will recognise this is my favoured workflow. There are lots of different ways of doing this sort of thing. I have a very talented friend called Dave, who does a lot of work for Privateer Press, sculpts a lot of their warjacks, and he never leaves ZBrush. He does everything in that program, and I've watched him work for hours, and I have no idea what he's doing. It fascinates me, but blows my mind. I can't work like that. Right, I'm just gonna move this out of the way. I've got a nice side view of the headdress here. Right, so what we're going to do now is a bit of modelling. So we've got this vertex, this little green dot, and we're going to tell it to stick to the surface of our model. And we're going to select it. Let's turn off the widget. And basically, this is a game of join the dots now. We're going to place it on the model, and I'm going to put it about there. And if you imagine the headdress, it's going to flow around here and come down the side, and then it's going to come around the neck, and it's going to have pieces coming out of it. So to achieve that, I've got my little dot, and I'm just going to pull these dots out and draw around the surface what I want my headdress to be. And because I've got this set to a sort of magnetic, it's going to stick constantly to the surface. I'm also going to turn on a mirror, so it's creating, you can see this orange line here, it's creating it on both sides at once. I'm going to bring that to the middle, and then we're going to go backwards to create the centre line running down the head. Like so. And now I need to connect all of these up in such a way as to create the headdress that we want. I apologise in advance if this is not the most riveting thing in the world.
I think it's quite fascinating to see exactly how much actually goes into creating what is essentially a block on the actual model. Obviously you add detail to it, but then yeah, from the beginning to a finished product.
there are lots of ways you could approach this. I mean, and I have no doubt that ZBrush aficionados are out there screaming at me right now that I could, if I so chose, do this using masking and extrusions and extractions in ZBrush and then sculpt the piece to look the way I want it to. But this gives there's a level of control to this that I really like. ZBrush is fantastic for many things, but it is quite free and easy with its control. And there are times when I just want a little bit more precision over what I'm doing. Usually, if like this, we're making something that's clearly of manufactured origin. You can see I'm just pulling this up the head, and in a minute we're going to have a little puzzle to solve, but I'll worry about that in a sec. And we're going to go, how are we going to do that? If we go 1, yeah, do that. Okay, 1, 2. The puzzle that I have to solve is to get the best results. Every shape I use now needs to be a square. So all of these need to be connected in such a way as to create four-sided shapes, and that involves a certain amount of figuring out how I can bring this quite wide piece down to a single piece there, which is what we've done. So we've got square, 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 square. Yep, they're all quads. That's all good. So we can see that piece looks like that. So it's still quite crude, so we're going to subdivide it, which will smooth it out. And I'm going to thicken it, so I'm going to add a modifier. I'm going to add a solidify modifier, set to the center, and then if I pull this slider, we can create the start of our headdress. And at this point I can then go in and say, right, I don't want these corner edges to be curved, so I can sharpen those by adding extra levels of detail, like so. I'm going to do an apply, and we'll do like that. So that's going to give me the basis of the headdress that we work on. And then the next piece I need to design, if we go back to the artwork, is this piece that sits over the head. So to create that, I'm going to start again by taking a single point. So I'll just borrow one from a friendly neighbourhood headdress. And this is just a case of looking at the art and going, right, so it comes up, down, and then follows the head round, and then follows the brow. So we'll move this one into place. We'll come down. Let's mirror again. We'll go across with that bit. Check the art again. Comes to a point and comes down, so we'll make sure we do that. I'm going to go and about there, and then I'm just going to adjust this. I'm going to just get that curve looking roughly right. Looks about right. So that can come across to the body, and then again, oops. Let's just do that so we can see where that dot goes. Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. Okay. And again, just gonna fill in the dots really. One. We might. I think I've got. Have I not got enough? I may have an incorrect number of points. We'll find out in a second. I want to get this core shape built fairly quickly so that we can drop it in and sculpt on it and have something awesome looking fairly quickly. Yeah, we got an incorrect number of dots. We'll just do that. Move it back to where it needs to be. Make it nice and thick. That puts it in place.
I'd say what I find really interesting is you start off with what looks like a real random line, and then suddenly it's this big block of actual substance.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It was just you kind of get a feel for, you know. I suppose the difference being that I know what's in my brain, so I kind of I know what we're going to end up with, whereas you guys don't until it's there. So what we need to do now is just create this piece here, and then I'll sort out all of this indentation, and we got some nice stripes in there, which we'll make sure is actually carved detail. Now this is very, very low detail right now. We don't need to worry too much about that. So what we're going to do is we're going to select that dot, and we're going to set our cursor to it, and we're going to angle our head. And then at that point, I'm going to create a circle, and I'm going to align it to my view, and I'm going to give it 8 points. So it looks like a polygon. And this is actually going to be our gem. So I need to rotate it 22.5. Hey, look at that. And then I need to go to normal. Right, so just check SXX 0.2. No. SY 0.2. Yes. Oh dear, that didn't work at all.
Brings
Let's try
back
that again.
horrible memories of trying to draw perspectively at school. Here's your vanishing point.
That was a horror show.
Oh, I was terrible at that sort of thing when I was a kid. Right, so we are going to extrude and scale that in. Let's turn off that a second. And then extrude and... Why are you doing that, you weird... There we go, that's what you're supposed to do. Select that. Widget. Z. Okay. And that is going to be our gem. Just check. Right, it's not actually square. So we're going to scale it slightly in one of its axes. In fact, we can do that. Change this to view. There we go. Turn to the side. Rotate it to the right angle to fit our model, and move it to there. Right, so that's the start of the gem, but obviously it's just sort of floating there. So we're going to copy those edges and separate them, and then I'm going to extrude these down, extrude them again, and close up the back so it's a solid. Then I'm going to take that edge that we just copied. There it is. And we're going to create the holder bits in now. and pull that all the way back inside his head, because that won't matter. That's what we want. Sweet. So that put the gem where it needs to be. We can now take a look at this. So a couple of things need to happen with this. On the artwork, it has a protrusion at the end here. We're just going to pull something out like that and then deal with the detailing of it shortly. And the other thing that I need to do is these panels need to be inset to create our internal detail. So I'll shrink those in and then inset them. Is it going to be inset on the back as well as the front? Let's
What's
see
the
if
artwork say?
no,
No,
it's
so
it's
solid
plain
on
on
the back.
it's plain on the back. That's fine. Let's also deal with this. Select that edge, Z, pull that up. Right, so that gives us our basic detail, but what we need to do now is subdivide it and make him look like Princess Amidala, because we now need to sharpen up all of these edges. The reason that I've made it go all squodgy is because when we take it into ZBrush, ZBrush's default setting is to subdivide. That's how it creates its detail and levels of sculpting. So we have to subdivide the model at this stage ourselves to make sure that we have a we have all of these lines. What I'm doing is I'm adding lines, because when you subdivide a model, what the computer's doing is it's interpolating the gap between. So if we look here, it's looking at that line to that point and then that line to that point and interpolating that curve from those lines. So the closer together we put two lines, the less curved its interpolation can be, because the less distance it has to interpolate. So as an example, we can see there that's a smooth curve. If I put a line and pull it to that point, we get an angle there because the interpolation changes. So what I'm doing is, having created our basic shape, I then go through and add these control lines to sharpen the bits we want sharp and leave the bits that we want smooth soft, to create that. Once we've done that, alright, that's got striped detail on, but it's not cut in looking. I'm just glancing off to the artwork at the side. So what we're going to do is we're going to hide that. We don't need that, and there's a line there we don't need. So we're going to take this now. We're going to export it from our modeling tool as head dress, and we're going to pause and realise that we didn't click selection only, and then we're going to do it again and get it right. Selection only, export objects. And then we're going back to here. We can end it. And there it is. That's interesting. Where is my... I didn't have the gem selected. Honestly. What am I like? Yeah, I didn't have the gem selected, so we'll grab the gem as well and do that again.
Dual thief about, obviously.
Yeah. Did someone call for Dr. Jones? Right, so we'll re-import that fresh so we know it's right. There we go, that's what we want. So we can see there we got our object, and it's one colour because it's one group. ZBrush thinks it's one thing. If I click auto groups, it changes all to different colours, because ZBrush works its way through and works out which pieces are connected to each other and which pieces are just sort of sitting in the same space. So we can see here that the green part of the headdress is poking through. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go to our core form that we're working on. We're going to append address to here, make sure we get the right one. Turn that off and see it sitting in place, and then we can develop it a little more. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to split it into its salient parts. So each of these pieces is now separate, meaning I can work on them individually without worrying too much about it the other pieces. So let's turn that, and that on, and that on. So the first thing we're going to do is correct that little bit of detailing there. So at this point I get my move brush, turn on symmetry, and just tweak that into the body. There we go, problem solved. Right, so what we want to do now then is this headdress needs some stripes cut into it, and then we need to put some jewels and detailing into it as well. So first thing I'm going to do is dynamesh it, which will enable me to sculpt into the surface. There we go. And I'm going to press this button here. Right, so I'm going to put these panels in now. So I'm going to get my, let's see if this works, get this rectangle brush, turn on symmetry, and I'm going to mask it into, that's what I wanted to avoid. What are we at? Okay. I need to be very careful here. I don't want any rounds which... There, that's fine. Do a quick blur and sharpen. And then... I'm going to do a bit more masking. Mask that off. So, what I'm doing here is having got our piece into the program, I'm now masking away all the bits that we don't want to work on. Because we don't want this detail to apply to the outer parts, just to the inner. So now we've just got that inner bit masked. There's a little bit there, look, we need to catch. A little bit there that we need to catch. There. With those masked, we can get the move tool and push these in, or actually we'll pull them forward. That looks cool. Creating our nice paintable stripes on our headdress. Right, and again, quick dive into the artwork. We see that there is a double seam running through the model. So we will select two lines running through the model, like that. Let's just reproject first of all. There we go. As I was saying, draw two seams onto the model, which are going to mark out our boundary lines. And then use the right tool, mask this off. And that gives us this all the way around. And that one's possibly thicker than the other one. Oops. So we'll just trim them both down a little touch actually. There we go. And then I can use this tool to just pull those in a little bit, which creates that detail there. Right, and then we can, I have some pre-set up shapes that we can use to create some of our detailing now. So we can take these and, oh hello, why is it doing that then? Let's try that. That's better. split those away and divide them to get a bit more detail. And then we're going to add some gems to these. So we're going to use my sphere tool, and normally it will produce a... Why are you doing that? That's better. It's going to produce a half sphere, but I'm going to reduce the strength of it down a little touch, so that instead of a half sphere we get a slightly more gem-like finish, like so. Let's try and get it actually in the middle. That's always good. Right, and then I'm going to do some work with this piece, and again I'm going to dynamesh it.
So when you say dynamesh, do you mean does that just break it down into more pixels, or?
Yeah, effectively, if I zoom in, you can see so that's the original. What the dynamesh does, this button up here, I set a resolution, and this slide is vague as to what the resolution means, but fundamentally it creates a much more detailed surface. The other thing that it does, just to show you, is if you've got different objects, dynamesh will let you combine them into a single mesh, which you can then sculpt as a single unit. So it's quite a nice way of constructing, and you can also subtract in a similar way. And it's just a way of being able to create sculptural detail, because the underlying sort of those little, you know, these tiles effectively that make up the model determine what you can sculpt. So because they're all flowing in this direction, I can get quite smooth lines if I'm cutting in that direction. But if I cut on the diagonal, you can see, because I'm not following the flow, it's much less detailed. What Dynamesh does is it creates such a density that you don't really need to worry about that. You can just get on and create whatever sculptural detail you want to without having to think too much about the topology. And then what ZBrush's genius is it actually then has a tool that will let you recreate the highly detailed structured topology that you got rid of. So you get the best of both worlds. You get to Dynamesh and not have to worry about how things look at all, and then when you need to pose the model, you can recapture all of your underlying geometry. So we're going to just create some banding like that. Sweet, that looks good. Okay, so that angle of that gem bothers me slightly, so I'm just going to rotate it a little bit with these. The rotation and the movement tools in this program are very intuitive. By tapping on a surface, it draws a line perpendicular to the surface, so I know that that's pointing in the direction, that face at the top of the gem is pointing in the direction I want this to move. So I tap on it and then I can just move it, look at it, rotate it a tiny touch more, and move it back in a tiny touch. A lot of the work that I do has this kind of fiddling backwards and forwards quality to it. Right, so that's the basics of our headdress in place now. And with that in place, we're able to, let's delete that, we don't need that. We're able to reevaluate this head and decide what we want to do now to develop it, because we've got the headdress, which gives us the context for the rest of the head, really. Yeah. So at this point, this is where you guys get to chip in with your thoughts on what we do. Now, one of the things I note from the artwork, and I will add to the model immediately because it will help us, is that the figure has a pair of metal hoops. Let's do it there. Embedded just in front of the... What do you mean? Sorry, it's being annoying. Right, there we go. It wasn't being annoying, that's not fair. I was trying to make it do something it can't do. So it has these embedded in its flesh, more or less where its ears would be. And then it will have chains coming off these. And being an organised kind of person, I have a chain brush that we can use, and we'll just mock in. They're a bit small, aren't they? That's bigger. That's more like it. And grab that end. Now these chains, as you can see, are live curves. So I just need to get that to get it just the right place. Then it decides, no, I want to go behind instead. There, that'll do. Then we can just move these, and then remove the rings that I put in as my guide. There. So that gives us more of a sense of what the overall head's going to be like. Let's just rotate those in against the face ever so slightly. What I'm doing here is masking the chain. Well, unmasking the chain. The rest of the head's masked. There we go. A bit more gravity. Right. Okay. So now, guys, we've got our proxy chains in place. They look a little bit like plats right now. They won't do when we actually finish building the model, but they're just there to help us define what we want to do with our face. So I've isolated the head, so it's a separate entity to the rest of the model. So we can start to go in and say, right, you know, it's Egyptian. Do we want it to have a more hawkish profile? Because straight away we get something more Egyptian feeling. And commanding. But I mean, one of the things is that it still feels quite human at the moment, and I think that one of the ways that we're going to get around that is going to be by detail the surface of the model. So, for example, we'll, you know, if we start to add this kind of sculptural elements to create the sense of it not being made of flesh but being made harder material, it's going to give you the it's going to change the character of the model quite a lot. I'm going to take that out though, because that's kind of the work we want to do last of all. Probably giving him some eyeballs. Let's do that.
Eyeballs are for sissies.
Well, it's, you know, it's a view, which is more than he'll have with no eyeballs. Ooh. Say hello to Mr. Angry Eyes.
Yeah. That's good.
The angrier the better.
Okay, so that's where we're at now. That's quite imposing, actually. Putting the eyes in does make a difference.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I just got an image of Roger Rabbit. The bad guy in Roger Rabbit.
Oh, when his eyes pop out, you mean? Yeah. Yeah. Looking good.
Yes. So, if you have any thoughts about our face, because as you can see, we can make broad proportional changes quite easily. I mean,
Yeah. Green Lummox has stated that it almost looks a bit like Anubis with the larger, pointier nose.
Isn't he a jackal god?
I think so.
yes, yeah. That's probably not a bad thing, I would think.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, this is the kind of tinkering that I can spend hours on. Let's.
Yeah, unfortunately,
Let's
Mark,
just-
whose faction this is about the only one who isn't with us, so I'm sure
Yes.
he'd have some input. But
Currently,
Well, I'll
limit
tell
up
you
to
what.
50.
We might just get him a bit more haughty looking, like that, and I might call it a on the face for now. We can come back to it and develop it further. I think there's the potential there for it to work really well, but I think at the moment we're broadly where we can get to with that face.
Yeah, that looks pretty.
definitely
So
very threatening.
Yeah.
let's
Just-
take a look at
sorry,
the body. Yes.
Quick point on the chains that we've got coming down.
Mhm.
The initial loop is attached to the headdress.
Is it?
Okay, that's
It
fine.
should be. Sorry, rather, I should say.
Well, these chains will be replaced. They're one of the things that you kind of need to do once the model's posed, because the
Yeah.
final angle and weight of the how they're affected by geometry and gravity will be determined
By his pose.
by his pose. So anything that we add at this point will just be a stand-in. So now what we're going to do is we can go in and let's just look at some stuff about muscles. And his muscles are not desperately realistic, because this muscle, actually, this is kind of the same muscle group. And the way the arm goes together is ever so complicated. It's something that is very easy to get wrong. Believe me, I have many times. So you've got this large muscle that sits here. It goes under the shoulder muscle, but sort of flows under it in such a way that when this piece moves, there's a dividing line that's visible here. But when the arm lifts, that dividing line flattens out because of the way the muscles move, and then the bicep emerges from underneath these, and then the gap between the bicep and the rear muscle creates the armpit, and then there's a smaller muscle that comes out at the back. You'll notice that I'm not too hot on the names of any of these muscles. I just know where they are and what they look like. So I just want to, again, because he's a golem, he's going to be quite crude, but I just want to make sure that we've got some sense of that musculature built into the model, because as humans, it's part of what makes us see things as powerful, because we know our own anatomy. So it's important that we have at least a nod to it on the model. And then this broad, big shoulder muscles at the back. Back muscles are huge compared to the muscles at the front. It's the same with the neck. All of the strength of the neck is in the muscles at the back. And one of the things, I mean, we've gone for a very sculptural feel for the face. We could have done the model in a much more sort of lumpen kind of finish as well, and that would have been a valid sort of creative choice. But I think that it's going to look nicer if we go for this very sculpted feel and then break it up with surface detailing. I think that's going to be what works. In fact, having said we've finished with the head, I do just want to. I'm going to duplicate it. I'm quite intrigued to know if that cracking that I was talking about earlier. I just want to very briefly dynamesh ahead and try some textural elements, because that'll help us then move forward into the body, knowing what we want to do. Have we had any questions, by the way?
There's a couple of questions about software, just what you were using. ZBrush at the time.
This is ZBrush, yeah. I mean, it really is the only choice. I think you can. The competing product, I suppose, that some people use is a program called Mudbox, which was developed by Weta Workshop for making Lord of the Rings, and it was then bought by Autodesk, who make 3D Max and Maya and so forth. And it's a very good piece of software. I had a education license copy a little while ago, which I played around with, and it was very good. But I think that this is a more featured, pure sculpting program. ZBrush is more featured, and it has some features and tricks. I mean, this whole dynameshing and retopologizing and all of this sort of thing you can't do with other bits of software. And that's where its strength lies, really. Because ultimately, I have to produce files that our 3D printer can cope with, and that means some pretty fundamental changes to what's going on underneath the hood of the model, as it were. I'm assuming that everyone who's tuned in will already have seen Abby.
Yeah, she went up on Beasts of War.
They should have, yeah. She's been on Beasts of War. She's been on our Facebook page for a few days.
So how long have you used ZBrush for now?
Man and boy. I started with it in, what was it? Oops. What would it have been? 2008, 2007, something like that. And it was a much less fully featured program than the version that we're working with now. Dynamesh didn't exist. Retopologizing didn't exist. Some of the tools that we're using, some of the brushes that I'm using didn't exist. It's come a long way in that time. It started life actually as an illustration tool. It wasn't meant to be a 3D program at all. It was it's mutated almost beyond recognition.
I guess that's the brush part of the name.
Yeah. I think the original plan was that you set up 3D objects and then painted sort of a 2D composition. So it was meant to be a tool to help artists like lay out paintings and things. And it's just expanded and developed. I started on version 2. This is version 4.7. Version 5 is due out later this year. Once you buy a copy, all the subsequent version releases are free.
That's good.
So it's very generous. Cool.
Don't have to buy it every year like Windows or MS Office.
No, nothing like that. Yeah, I think that's going to work, isn't it?
We've just had a question in from Green Lummox. So, are you doing this with a mouse or a stylus/tab?
I'm working with it's a Wacom, which is about A4 in size. It's got a pen, a load of buttons that I don't know what any of them do. I've never used them. And yeah, the program is pressure sensitive, and you can do stuff with a mouse, but when you're doing things like broaches or posing a model and drawing masks and things, you can do all that with a mouse. But any sculptural work like this, you really do need the program to be using the pressure sensitivity that you get from the pen. So
that would allow you to cut more deeply, or
yeah. So let's just give an example. If I zoom in on the face, so I've got my pen and I've got this crack tool. So if I drag across, oops, it's actually so small we can't see it. If I drag across with the mouse, we get a line like that. If I drag with the pen, I can start very, very softly, press down, and come to a point finish by lifting up again. And it's the same if I've got the slash tool. If I draw on this surface with a slash, starting very gently, press harder and harder and harder, and then lift off again. Whereas if I do that with the mouse, you get nothing because the sensitivity is turned right down. So that degree of control is only possible using the pen. You can't replicate that with the mouse. And I liken, people tell me, oh, I tried doing some digital sculpting with my mouse and I didn't get on with it. And I was like, well, when you draw, do you tie your crayon to a brick before you start working?
Yeah.
Right. Cool. Right. Okay. How are we doing for time, by the way, before I start the next?
8:30.
8:30.
Going an hour already.
Right. Okay. So we'll do a bit of work on the body, and I think that'll be a good place to finish. So again, we're gonna try and recreate this very sculptural feeling form. So I'm going to use the slash tool to start with, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut lines in, and then I'm just going to. One of the things with ZBrush is by holding the Alt key, you can get the opposite effect. So the slash tool cuts in. By holding Alt, it pulls out. So if I hold Alt, and because I've got my pressure sensitivity, I just run a line very gently. Rather than pulling the surface out, it will just create a sharpened edge, which just gives me that crispness. So what I'm just going to do is cut these shapes in and aim to just create some very artificial feeling striations, which I will reinforce when we add surface detail like cracks and ligature marks in the sand that forms the model. So this is a great brush for cutting muscle planes and transitions between muscle groups anyway, but when we want something like this that needs to look highly artificial, it's even more useful. But I actually find this is quite a sculptural brush. A lot of the core work that I'll do with this sort of carving in, smoothing back, and creating forms and planar cuts. Big thing with sculpting, and doubly so sculpting for miniatures, is the transitions between surfaces need to be quite well defined, because your paintbrush needs to pick them up, and if you're a dip and an ink artist with your painting, you need something for those liquids to key off and run into. So you do a lot of work when you're sculpting miniatures, adding in these sort of channels and cut points, and the 3D printing is sufficiently detailed that it'll all get picked up.
Yeah, it seems to have come on quite a long way in a short time. The kind of 3D.
Yeah, I mean, the machine that we own, that we use for our printing, only came out last year. It was released last June, I think, July. So we bought it. Well, we entered into the long process because they're very expensive. You don't exactly get them overnight. They sort of build to order, but we began the process of ordering it within a few weeks of it having been released to market, and it's great. It's temperamental as all hell. It's like the guy that runs the machine for us, who's a scary biker dude. Looks like he should be on the cover of Sons of Anarchy, and his blood type is Jack Daniels. He says it's like working with Formula One. It's such high-end technology that you expect it to constantly go wrong. It needs looking after all the time, and it's mega temperamental. But when it works, it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
So we're just kind of sort of playing with the forms at the moment and just getting a feel for them. And again, it's going to come down to how crude versus how sculpted we decide the final form's going to be. Sorry?
I was just going to say, it's kind of that compromise whether he's just been touched up with a hammer and chisel or he's been running around punching things for 50 years and he's cracked and a bit worse for wear, isn't it? So.
Well, it is, and like you say, without Mark being here, I'm loath to push the model too far in a particular direction for obvious reasons. Just going to make a little there's a little adjustment we need to make there. So I'll just walk you through what the next stages are going to be anyway. So I will continue to work on defining all the forms, knowing that we've got an idea of what the surface detailing is going to look like, and then we'll build some more pieces of armour, build his huge, ridiculous sword. That's going to be lots of fun to work on.
Yep.
And get him into pose, and then we'll be able to take this through. So we'll probably be parking the model till Mark's back, and then I'd say he had about an extra 6 hours work to do, and then we should be in a place where he's done, which would be pretty awesome. So I think this is probably a good place to leave him, because I don't want to push the model too much further without the feedback from his daddy.
Yeah.
So is there any other questions or comments that people want to ask before we call it a day?
Green Lummox has been active in our chat. He said about Abigail, said yes, she looks fantastic.
Oh, excellent! Thank you very much. Do you want her up on screen briefly so we can have an interactive?
Yeah.
We can take a quick look.
A quick walk through of her, that'd be cool.
You see the many versions of her until we got to the final.
Nothing to do with me.
There she is. So this is our final model. Let's just turn perspective on because it just looks a bit more dynamic. So this is a good example of what I was saying earlier about casting. So, oh look, her strap's disappeared. She needs a strap there. So we can't cast these set of hands because this hole here would be filled with rubber. So we've designed the model intending to separate the arm there and there, so that'll be a little plug, and the arms and the pickaxe will be a single piece. And then again, this you get a similar problem at the back here. Yep. So this satchel will separate off, and then of course she'll only be about so big when you actually get her. It's always kind of weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's come out really nicely. I'm very pleased with her.
Yep.
She's very nice. So hopefully we'll get this chap finished before too long, and she'll have something to swing a pickaxe at. Although actually they're on the same side, aren't they?
They are, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe just in sparring.
Well, he might have punched the wrong thing. That'd be a good enough reason.
Yeah, right. I think the most important thing we can do right now is make a save, because ZBrush is many things, but reliable and stable are two things that it is not.
So what's one?
I sculpted the.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think you mentioned you had an issue when you were sculpting it that you lost a bunch of work, didn't you? Or
oh yeah, so certain things like dynameshing and all the rest of it can corrupt the model, and so you'll get a crash. You know, if I press 9, I get a quick save, and I can normally go back in. But very occasionally, you'll do that, and you'll press 9, you'll get a quick save, and you'll try and reopen the model, and everything with today's timestamp has been corrupted by the crash.
Oh.
And that's it. You're done. If you haven't actually physically saved the model out to a separate directory, start again. Those are good days, fun times.
So what's one of the worst issues you've had then? Have you ever?
quite recently, as in within the last 48 hours, I resculpted the same model 3 times.
Oh,
wow.
That was fun. I think the worst one was losing a Guild Ball model that was pretty much finished. But it's my own fault, you know. Iterative saves, gotta save. But I was a fool to myself. Didn't follow my own rules.
All too easy though to get carried away, and
Yeah.
before you know it, a few hours have passed.
Very much
Yeah.
so. Right, chaps. Thank you very
Okay.
much for everyone who's joined the stream. I hope it's been helpful and informative, and hopefully we'll be able to do some more work in the near future. Do some more again.
Yeah, no, thanks very much
Super.
for hosting us, and yeah, it's been very good. Yeah, fascinating.
Not a problem.
Okay, well, thanks everyone for viewing. Yeah, like Ross says, hopefully we'll do another one at some point, but we should, in theory, have some more models on the way, ramping up into the new year as well. So, thank you all, and thanks again to Russ.
Yes, thanks
Yeah.
very much, Russ.
Yes,
Much
thanks, Russ.
appreciated.
No worries. Good night.
Thank you.